The Japanese firmly believe that might is right. The essential amorality of the Japanese is in direct conflict with Western moral imperatives. Japan is preparing an economic sneak attack from which the United States may not recover. Our nation and its underlying values are threatened. Economic dominance is their goal.
These warnings are from a recent CIA-sponsored report that did little more than substitute the Yellow Menace for yesterday's Red Menace. With the dismantling of the Soviet Empire, the bipolar military imperatives of the Cold War are giving way to global economic challenges. Japan is a tough competitor, but it is also a vital economic partner, from Hollywood through Detroit to Wall Street. And beyond Japan, all of Asia is on the move. America faces a historic challenge.
In the 18th and 19th centuries, Asian cultures really were shattered, really were jolted by the arrival of Europeans and Americans with technology and money and military force. And their world was changed forever by the arrival of this Atlantic culture, if you will. One can argue, and I would argue, that America and Europe are about to be jolted in the same way. That an economic culture that can do things that we can't do seems to have been emerging in Japan and in some of the surrounding countries. And to that extent, you can call it a Pacific century, and that something new has been created that we have to deal with.
East Asia is marching forward under a new kind of capitalism, government-guided, centrally planned, and sometimes authoritarian. In 10 years, the region from Korea south to Indonesia will be using more steel than the United States and the European community combined. The whole area is growing at twice the rate of the West.
That there is an Asian challenge, that there is a new emerging East Asia out there, I think there is a consensus on that. The first response is to see that East Asia as an opportunity for the United States. In order for America to continue prospering, you have to deal with Asia and work together with Asia. The other response is to see East Asia, the challenge of East Asia, as a threat.
It's said that by the end of this century, Japan will have a stranglehold on the technology for automobiles, semiconductors, fiber optics, steel, and half the new patents in the world.
This commercial plays on fear. The so-called Asian miracle unfolds as the United States is losing the economic leadership it once took for granted.
Look what's happened to the American economy. The average American worker is making about 50 cents less in 1991 in real dollars than he was in 1970. 1 out of 3 jobs in the basic American industries have disappeared. Whole communities of people have been destroyed. There are about 40 million people living below the poverty line in the United States of America. At this point in our history, that's not a very proud boast. The life expectancy of children in the ghetto in Harlem in New York is lower than that of children in Bangladesh. Whose fault is that? We can't blame that one on the Japanese.
Once the American automobile was king of the road, and it drove the nation's powerful economy. The industry was created here, and it dominated the world. In those days, Detroit was the champion. But over the years, it left itself open to the Japanese challenge.
There's a story I tell in The Reckoning about Gene Bourdonnais, a rather talented Ford engineer. and he's sort of worried about the quality of the Ford cars. And he's at a dinner party, and he runs into Lyndon Townsend, one of the many saviors of Chrysler, one of the many men who took over Chrysler and was going to save it. And he says, Lynn, I am really worried about the quality of our cars. And Townsend says, gee, what are you worrying about quality for? Nobody worries about quality. Nobody cares about quality. The only thing people care about is their stock splits. And what's very important, because what he really means is our customers are not the people buying the cars. Our customers are the people buying the stock.
By the 1970s, Detroit was stalled. The steel and rubber industries followed auto into decline. The Big Three shut down dozens of their plants and moved a few into low-wage third-world countries. The Midwest became the Rust Belt. The core of the nation's manufacturing foundation was hollowed, and the human toll was in the millions.
I mean, when I came here 19 years ago, I'm serious. There used to be an old saying, you know, that my friends used to say, well, if I don't like this job, I'll just quit here. I can go across the street tomorrow and get another job. And that was the truth. You could do that. I mean, they just wanted people. They needed people. This company here was glad to get you. If you was going to be a decent worker, they was glad to get you. And the last 10 years, they've had the attitude they wish they could get rid of you.
This railroad towerman is about to lose his $25,000 a year job because of the regional freight decline. The downshift in auto production alone cost 500,000 jobs in Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio.
I'm assured to end up working for half or less money, half or less than I make now. And you could very well end up working anywhere. You got a family to feed, you got to feed them. My daughter's 10. There's a lot of things she wanted to do that we never got to do. When she's 15, 16 years old, she'll want a car, and I'm facing the future of minimum wage. It's a bad situation. Anyway, you want to have for your kid a future.
To the Japanese, Ronald Reagan's version of free market economics would seem some form of insanity. The Japanese have never really trusted the American economists who ask us to place all our faith in Adam Smith's invisible hand. They want that visible hand evident. They want the government to help. They want the government to assist. They want the country to stand behind the society. The Japanese feel that everybody ought to get some share in the action.
The Japanese miracle unfolded as industrial America declined. Soon the nation's governors were traveling to Tokyo for investment.
Ours is a simple message. Kentucky is open for business.
In 1982, Honda set up the first Japanese car plant in Ohio. Now there are 11 transplants here, several in joint ventures with General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. Japanese capital has also revived the steel and rubber industries. Some credit the Japanese with rebuilding the Rust Belt. Others see a threat.
You got to question whether you're inviting the devil in. I mean, now, I'm not saying you are, but you've got to question what you're doing when you're asking them to come in. And I've been asked by governors of a couple of states that they say, do you think we should be having the Japanese in? I said, let me tell you, I said that watch out for that pat on the back and all, and that they may have their hands around your throat before it's over with.
Japan was equally suspicious of the controversial Texas financier, known for his own ruthless corporate takeovers. He bought into a Toyota subsidiary and tried to get on its board of directors. It was freewheeling cowboy capitalism up against corporate Japan, whose core industries are closed to foreigners. Pickens was sent packing.
The American people are terribly suspicious of the Japanese. And some of the assets that they've purchased, the Rockefeller Center, Columbia Pictures, different ones, you've got to wonder what they've got a plan. Everybody's convinced the Japanese have a plan. I'm convinced they have a plan. And I wonder what that plan is.
I was going to ask.
I don't know. I haven't been invited in to see the plan. But I do believe we're in an economic war with the Japanese. And I do believe that everything that they purchase or they're involved in fits into the overall plan that they have for that economic war.
The United States is used to seeing itself as the world's industrial leader. But Japan's new global role and the scope of its investments here have left many Americans wondering.
I ain't never read the Wall Street Journal. I ain't no PhD. The trickle-down theory and Laffer curve are just Greek to me.
These auto workers were hand-picked by Mazda for its plant just outside of Detroit. Many were sent to Japan for training. Now they and their families try to blend the two work cultures.
We're all working for the Japanese, for little cars and color TVs, sending all our money overseas to the Eastern Sphere. One day we're gonna lose the roots, wear Oriental jeans and boots, and drink nothing but Kawasaki, sake, Honda, wine, and Mitsubishi light beer.
Yeah, we do work for the Japanese, but there are 3,500 American people that make this car. There are some Japanese that are advisors and in important positions, but the people that actually build the car are Americans, so I consider this an American car.
But the production system is totally Japanese. The plant is an exact copy of Mazda's parent plant in Hiroshima. It's often said Americans work to live and Japanese live to work. U.S. industrial workers have traditionally distrusted their bosses, while in Japan, company unions promote loyalty and sacrifice for the good of the corporation. Everyone in the plant, managers and workers, wear the same uniform, and each morning they critique each other's appearance.
The Japanese are too strict and they have their own ways, and they're trying to put their ways on American workers, which is
sucks. Brother, they come out to you and they say, they don't ask you, can you do this job? They say, do this job. It ain't like, can you keep up with that line? You will keep up with that line. Yeah. Or you will lose your job. My family's got to eat. What can I do?
Oh, I'm in love with the job. Anybody knows me will tell you I love it. It's financially made such a difference in my life that I'm different even because of it.
In 1985, Mazda moved into the depressed Detroit area as a goodwill gesture and to help out Ford, which owns 25% of Mazda and which has some of its probes built at Flat Rock. Michigan also gave Mazda big tax breaks. Still, moving into the nation's car capital was a bold decision. Buy America was the battle cry, and the resentment lingers.
Sayonara imports. Tanks, but no tanks to imports.
I've got nothing personally against the Japs. If they stay home, let them stay in their country. They got their own industry. The United States provided for that. They give them their industry. I think that they should stay in great Japan, where they belong. We bombed it. We blew them up. Now we nurture them right back to health and give them factories in our country.
Toyota is a classic American success story.
When Toyota, Nissan, and Honda set up shop here, they steered clear of the cities and chose low-wage, undeveloped, and predominantly white areas for their plants and fought to keep the auto workers' union out. Mazda braved the hostile environment and worked with the unions from the start. Mazda got 100,000 job applicants and after careful screening hired 3,500. Today they earn about $35,000 a year plus some $5,000 in benefits.
We have a no layoff clause in our contract, which is pretty outstanding, and a lot of people want that. They want to have security, and Mazda offers that.
No, they expected a lot, they demanded a lot, and rightfully so. The quality was something that I haven't been exposed to in my previous positions. You know, when they talk about quality, 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 they definitely, they live it.
The Japanese have developed a high-quality, lower-cost, mass production system that the rest of the automotive world is now trying to emulate. At Mazda, the workforce is divided into teams of 6 to 10 people who switch jobs with each other to learn additional skills. There's constant pressure on the group to come up with suggestions that cut costs or boost quality. The Japanese call this relentless drive to be better Kaizen.
We said, you guys ain't cooperating, so we ain't cooperating back, and so they're saying fine, and you know.
To the Auto Workers Union, Kaizen can mean an assembly line that moves too fast and increases the risk of injury.
The whole Kaizen program is really what Ruther and the boys in Flint saw as speed up. But this speed up is wrapped up and packaged in this sophisticated thing of MQ circles and orientation, and it's very, very, very sophisticated. But make no mistake about it, I don't think there's a member out there that doesn't understand what the reality is, that this is that we just can't keep up like this.
The company changed the contractual language.
There have been no strikes at Flat Rock, but when the local leadership feels Mazda is pushing too hard, it stages symbolic protests like refusing to wear the Mazda uniform.
The company's had several ongoing contractual violations, and since they're breaking the contract, we're breaking the dress code. Have a nice day.
Despite the frictions at Mazda, the industry rates its cars near the top, and Japan, which has captured a third of the U.S. car market, is now racing for half. For Detroit, the plus side has been 25,000 new jobs created by Mazda and its several hundred suppliers. The Japanese are also putting up the only new skyscraper in the city, and in many ways they're becoming part of the community. Japan's performance in the nation's heartland has won mixed reviews. Some see an increasing threat to the survival of America's Big Three, while others see an opportunity to raise issues vital to the nation's industrial future. Detroit has responded by improving efficiency and quality, but it still wants Congress to limit Japanese car sales here. Beyond protectionism, however, discussion of a long-term strategy to strengthen America competitively is just beginning. Horsepower is giving way to computer power as the world enters what is being called the information age. America helped usher in the new era with its scientific breakthroughs, the cathode ray tube, the transistor, and the computer chip. But it was Japan, Taiwan, and Korea who turned these inventions into market-winning products.
Beginning in the 1950s, Japan passed a series of fundamental laws. One of them was a law for promotion of the aircraft industries. One of them was a law for promotion of the machinery industries. And one of them was a law for promotion of the electronics industries.
Like this.
The Japanese government launched a planned civilian economy, while the U.S. government was consumed with achieving military superiority in the Cold War. The Pentagon also gave the economies of Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan an enormous boost, with billions spent on bases there, and later for their support in the Vietnam War. Washington also opened the American market wide to their exports, while allowing them to protect their markets from American competition.
The deal essentially was that if the Japanese would throw in with us in the Cold War, we would make them rich. Well, this was a way to make them rich.
The arrival of cheap, high-quality radios, TVs, and tape recorders from Japan spelled doom for the domestic consumer electronics industry. But it was a bonanza for American shoppers.
Turning Japanese, I think I'm turning Japanese, I really think so. Turning Japanese, I think I'm turning Japanese, I really
In 1956, Ampex invented the first videotape recorder. But it took almost 20 years and an enormous investment in R&D to commercialize the technology for the VCR revolution. Along the way, Ampex and other American companies dropped out. Today, there are more than 250 million video cassette recorders around the world, and most are produced by Japan, Taiwan, and Korea.
We would have killed for pictures of that quality.
Charles Anderson was an engineer on the Ampex team that invented the first video recorder.
The technology in there, with one exception, was all developed back in our lab. The same FM system is used, the format approximates the early units that we did. It's all there. We just lacked the vision. We lacked the courage to make long-term investments. We walked away from it.
Today, Charles Anderson works for Panasonic. He is one of an estimated 3 million Americans whose jobs were created by Asian and European investment here. Korea and Taiwan are also moving swiftly ahead in the electronics field. Taiwan is now third in the world in the production of liquid crystal computer screens and a key IBM supplier.
Part of the culture is that people are very high on education, and thus you have thousands, tens and thousands of students that get into engineering, and thus, you know, we are very successful in marketing products worldwide.
Korea is another new and powerful player. It has become so successful that Japan has stopped selling it technology. This has not stopped its big conglomerates from joining the electronics contest. Samsung now has a chip-making plant in California to supply the American market.
Samsung Electronics will continue on its own way, transforming itself as a leading world enterprise that can turn dreams into reality.
In Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, the government is behind industry in the critical race to develop the next generation of computer chips. America's lead is no longer secure. Once the Pentagon guided high-tech research, but now the critical technologies are on the commercial side. Scientists note there is more sophistication in a camcorder than in a Patriot missile. Congress has begun to consider what the government response should be.
The Japanese have, their government has gotten behind their big companies and pushed them forward, given them the resources and to give them the support. We haven't, because we've always chosen to go it alone and let free enterprise operate by itself, and it can. But in this day and time, I submit that we better form better partnerships on the federal level. The federal government ought to have a role in this.
It's a shame that we have to have a hearing to determine what it'll take for us to become more competitive with our foreign competitors. They don't have meetings, they just go out and beat the pants off it. So certainly
Washington has made a start in supporting the high-tech sector. Congress provides $100 million a year in matching funds for cooperative research by a group of the nation's electronic leaders. The consortium, Sematech, the first of its kind, is located in Austin, Texas, and led by a distinguished physicist, William Spencer.
I believe that Sematech represents the most important experiment in collaboration in the nation today. Our mission is relatively simple. We want to provide the U.S. semiconductor industry, the domestic capability for world leadership in manufacturing.
Tough question. Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Although a partnership between government and industry works well in Asia, there is a long tradition of opposition here, especially to using taxpayers' money to back giants like IBM, Texas Instruments, and Hewlett-Packard, and the other high-tech corporations that comprise Sematech.
The provision of just capital funds through the government, through the political system, through a bunch of bureaucrats who are somehow going to act as investment bankers and venture capitalists. It's ludicrous.
Public debate on how to maintain the nation's technological strength is just beginning. Beyond R&D funding, Congress has discussed tax, trade and educational policies, as well as cuts in military spending. But there's little support in the current administration for a coordinated government strategy, an industrial policy.
There's one particular economist I remember in a high-level government meeting who said that we in the U.S. could not put ourselves in the position of criticizing or praising Japanese industrial policy, because if we did that, we would be admitting that governments can do something to protect and promote industry. Everybody knows that's not possible because the most efficiently running economy is that where the government does not intervene.
Under the free market banner, Wall Street is supposed to finance industrial expansion and innovation. But after a decade of financial speculation, bank failure, and fraud, there is a shortage of investment capital. The Japanese have had their share of financial scandal also. But they see finance not as an end in itself, but as aiding industry with low-cost, long-term capital.
Japan has regarded finance as a utility. The very structure of the financial system and the way financial institutions are regulated are with the goal of increasing industrial competitiveness in mind.
The classic American entrepreneur has always had faith in the wisdom and efficiency of the free market, and fear of distortions that would come from government intervention.
If we let the markets work, I mean, they seem to work very well for us. We have the #1 economy in the world. We're the #1 leader. We're the only superpower. I mean, that didn't all happen by accident, but it happened by free markets and the free enterprise system. Other people want to take that same system and fix it so it's a little better. And the Japanese have tried to do just that. They have a very cozy relationship between government and business. And these things work for the short term. They will work. The Japanese are going to have problems with this system in the future. They're going to have a hard time keeping an economy closed off from the rest of the world going into the 21st century.
The Japanese barriers to foreign investment are under attack. They've been given access to the world market, and now there is mounting political pressure for them to open their own large, wealthy market to foreign competition. When it comes to high finance, however, it is a different ballgame. In this Wall Street Weekend League, they are team players, for the interests of both sides have converged.
Got it.
Wall Street needs the billions Tokyo is investing, and Japan needs good earnings and the political goodwill its capital brings.
Every day we are working together and working play together, but it's a good chance to know each other more.
One of Tokyo's main brokerage houses, Yamaichi, has an American office on top of the World Trade Center.
There's a couple of different worlds out there. There's a political world, there's an economic world. And the economic world, I believe, is a little bit more important than the political world. And there is a tremendous integration between the world economies.
Yamaichi helps both Japanese and American companies raise money. They also help the U.S. government borrow money by buying and then reselling treasury bonds. In the 1980s, Japan held a third of America's national debt, which tripled during that decade.
We have a huge fiscal deficit, and at some stage there is a problem of digestion of the bonds the U.S. Treasury is selling month after month. If the Europeans, and the Japanese, and the others in Asia, the Middle East all get indigestion of buying so many Treasury securities, that's when we'll have to worry.
Until now, Japan has been willing to keep lending, but it has begun to cut back. It is investing more and more in its own sector of the Pacific Rim, the arc that curves down from Korea to Indonesia and Singapore. This new economic region will rival and perhaps surpass the rest of the world in the 21st century.
In recent years, and certainly as we look ahead, more money will be coming from other countries in Asia which have developed very rapidly. For example, we have worked with investors in Korea, in Taiwan, in Indonesia. I'll be going to Thailand in my next trip abroad. There's a lot of money out there. It's a question of getting to the people who are making the decisions and have them make the decisions to place the funds here in the United States.
America's search for funds in Asia is a historic reversal. Once the biggest investor in Asia, we are now the biggest borrower. After World War II, Washington spent billions and fought 2 wars in the Pacific to hold back the communist threat. But now that capitalism is blossoming in Southeast Asia, America cannot afford to take advantage of the investment opportunities it helped create.
It's taken us a while to appreciate the value of their businesses, their economies, and the uses to which we could put our business over there. We never thought of Taiwan or Singapore before, but now they become factories. Singapore businessmen are out looking for businesses to buy in Silicon Valley. Thailand has become a much more productive, many-sided country than it was before. Indonesia is advancing. Malaysia is becoming a modern society. These are no longer to be dismissed as underdeveloped countries.
Even communist Vietnam wants closer economic ties with America. But the United States has been slow to abandon its Cold War economic embargo. Meanwhile, in the rest of Southeast Asia, memories of Japan's World War II occupation linger, and the region wants more American investment to counter the threat of Japanese economic domination. But the U.S. has not developed a new policy to deal with the changes in the region.
The government has yet to formulate a coherent strategic response to what has happened in these countries, what has happened in Asia, in the Pacific Rim countries. The tales of, you can go back 20, 30 years and it's the same issues that keep cropping up over and over again. The loss of competitiveness in industry after industry, the assumption that with this last trade agreement that these problems are going to be resolved. They're not going to be resolved. And until we have an understanding and a willingness to face what has happened in that part of the world, we're going to continue to decline as a country.
While much of the nation sees Asia's emergence as an economic threat, one area is aware of new opportunities, America's own Pacific Rim. Trade with Asia and the inflow of capital and immigrants has helped make the Pacific coast more robust economically than the rest of the nation. Seattle is the closest port to Asia, and the export-import flow is surging.
I've seen it grow astronomically, particularly in Korea and Taiwan. Japan has always been a comer for years and years. The ships are getting better, they're getting faster. I can only see it growing.
And one more makes five!
Pacific Rim is you know, us and the Orient, and we're the gateway to the Pacific Rim, more or less. And the trade to us would be good for us because we're here to do business.
This is America's most important commercial connection to Asia. Boeing 747 Jumbo Jet, the nation's most complex and sophisticated piece of merchandise. These are some of the craftsmen who helped build the original in 1969.
It's heartwarming to see a good product out there and to see a great success in what I'm doing.
These are the biggest customers.
Today marks another milestone in the long-standing relationship between Japan Airlines and the Boeing Company. It is my great honor to welcome you all to the delivery of the 75th Japan Airlines 747. Congratulations to Japan Airlines on building the world's largest fleet of the world's largest airliners.
Today you saw the ceremony where Japan Airlines took delivery of their 75th 747. Japan Airlines is the largest corporate purchaser of U.S. goods and services in the world. I think that represents close to over $9 billion that they have purchased from the U.S. We still have 61 more 747s on order and option to deliver to Japan Airlines. So you could see just the magnitude and the significance of that customer is, not only to Boeing, but to the balance payment issue.
Boeing is the nation's #1 exporter, and Asia is its #1 overseas market. Many of its components are also produced there as part of multi-million-dollar subcontracting deals with China, Taiwan, Korea, and Japan. Even Mongolia is no longer off limits. While this former Soviet satellite is trying to recapture the glories of its past, with a movie epic on the mighty warrior Genghis Khan, it is also trying to enter the jet age.
Sometime next year, there will be Boeing airplanes flying in Mongolia. And we'll be probably be training Mongolian pilots and engineers this year.
Boeing has serious competitors in the Southeast Asian market, McDonnell Douglas and Europe's Airbus. To meet their challenge, Boeing is expanding production by 40% and introducing its first new model in a dozen years, the 777.
One only has to travel in Asia where you can't get a seat between Hong Kong and Taipei. They have 25 wide-body flights a day, and you can't just ring up like you can in the United States and get a seat. It's very, very difficult. The airports can't take any more frequency. So the only way to meet that demand is with bigger airplanes, and that's what we think the 777 is going to accomplish.
To help meet the tremendous cost of developing and launching the new 777, Boeing has taken Japan in as a venture capital partner. And for the first time, Japan, previously only a subcontractor, is doing design as well as manufacturing. It is producing the fuselage. This is a major advance for Japan's aerospace industry, which is aimed at catching up with and possibly surpassing the West. Some workers are worried.
I'd like to see Boeing set up in a third world country, a country that use the work rather than deal with the Japanese, who are likely to steal the technology and build the plane themselves.
I think this country's benefited a great deal from Japanese technology. This program's being shot on a Japanese camera, for one thing. We work in a machine shop where the best machines are Japanese. The most technologically advanced equipment. Our computer workstations are largely Japanese. I personally would like to see a transfer of technology between the two countries and other countries besides Japan.
It is almost an industry given that the next generation of high-tech aircraft will be multinational ventures because of the huge cost and the varying expertise required. Cooperative competition, or perhaps competitive cooperation, is the formula for the future. Economists studying America's industrial competitiveness have examined Boeing carefully. Glenn Pascal, former director of finance for the state of Washington, has written about Boeing and corporate strategies for long-term growth.
Boeing bets the net worth of its company every decade on the next generation of airliner. The research and development costs are in the billions, and it's such a competitive business that the profits Boeing accumulates are not large. They plow all of the profits that they build up into R&D for the next airliner. They want to be the best in the world, and they figure the profits will follow if they can maintain their market position. It's a high wire act, and they do it decade after decade.
Another Seattle success story is the world's largest computer software producer, Microsoft. Plugged into the booming markets of Asia, it is thoroughly American, built on individual creativity, sometimes uniquely expressed. The computer nerd with a genius for business who looked into the future and saw a software empire is Bill Gates. He dropped out of Harvard at 19 and with a group of friends began writing software. Today, at 37, he is the second richest man in America.
The PC industry is faced this year with a major question of whether it will continue to be the very innovative, high-growth industry that it was throughout the 1980s.
These days, the domestic computer industry is struggling. Asian competition and slow growth have forced the big computer companies to cut back and team up in joint ventures to withstand the exports from Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. From the start, Microsoft tied its creative software strength to Japan's hardware excellence.
There are very few companies in the world who are actually investing in fundamental research and development in fields like optics and storage and communication in the way that Japanese companies are. So it's been a very interesting, I wouldn't call it a marriage because it's more informal than that, but a set of interchanges between Microsoft and many of the Japanese companies that we've been working with in pioneering these multimedia technologies.
America is ahead of Japan in creating computer software. On what it calls its campus, Microsoft encourages a freewheeling atmosphere for its computer programmers that would be hard to find in Japan.
The great thing about juggling, and the reason so many programmers juggle, is because it requires so much concentration that it allows you to sort of blank your mind.
Everybody says that software is an individual more of an individual act. I'm not sure that that's true. I'm not really that sure that America has that much of a lead.
You're never going to have a time, I don't think, at least in the next century, where software is a manufactured process. It's always going to be a very creative individual process. And maybe that's why we're going to keep our lead in this one area.
I personally don't see any particular reason why the Japanese can't do software just as well as we. I have a lot of respect for them, and a lot of what we do, I think they are well suited to do well. I wouldn't feel too complacent about our forever owning the software market.
Microsoft produces software in the major Asian languages, and it has operations in Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan. All of America's major computer companies have R&D operations in Japan, where researchers are trying to figure out how the hardware and software of tomorrow will interconnect.
You have to go and talk to these guys and say, you know, if you put a powerful microprocessor in your fax machine, then you can do all these kinds of things. And then you just work it forwards from there. Then they'll start to build hardware, and we'll start to build software, and 2 years from now, products will come to be.
As world leaders dealing from strength, Boeing and Microsoft have profited from their operations in Asia. And the Asian trade connection has generated growth in jobs throughout the region. But even Seattle has its share of urban ills.
We might be able to have a budget.
Funding cutbacks have hurt public schools. And community leaders fear that Seattle students may not have the educational tools to meet the increasing demands of their own advanced international economy.
I still have the feeling we as a country don't get it. It is the shape of the emerging world economy. Asia is an opportunity if we are up to speed and if we are competitive and if companies like Boeing and Microsoft represent what American industry is like. But if we don't realize the seriousness with which other people are willing to work, then Asia does become a threat. And then we start blaming them for being industrious. But ultimately, we have to blame ourselves for not being industrious. So we need to multiply the attitude of that work ethic that you find at Boeing and Microsoft and companies like that all over the United States. So the market on the Pacific Rim becomes a giant opportunity because we're a full and equal participant, not a threat because we can't compete.
Where America does compete worldwide, better than any other country, is in selling and marketing its popular culture. The American image makers have won the global mind with their promise. Dreams can come true. The entertainment industry is the country's second largest exporter after the aerospace industry, and its products, movies, music, television programming, and home videos account for an annual trade surplus of some $8 billion.
When I came to know that my favorite pop group, New Kids on the Block, was coming to Singapore, I was really excited. The big day finally came. My friends and I brought along our autograph books to be signed. We were dressed in the funkiest outfit you ever saw. I even wore a jacket that bore the sign, I love the kids on the
From a
block.
Singapore classroom to a Tokyo rap club, the youth of Asia are infatuated with American images, sounds, and lifestyles. They identify with a sense of openness, individuality, and self-expression that is uniquely American.
America is the most open country in the world, and it is one reason why America is welcome. America is wanted by all or many countries in the region, in the Asia-Pacific region. The Japanese are not used to that, of treating other people, non-Japanese people, as equals, the same people. It's not indigenous in the Japanese culture to think of other people as like us.
One of the great strategic advantages the U.S. has over almost any other nation on earth is that it can absorb talented people from around the world, cream them off from wherever they start, and make them part of our success. And I think America's openness to Asian immigrants is one of the great strengths we have right now. The history of immigration in the U.S. is that it has always been disruptive when it's occurred, disruptive socially, but it has almost always been economically beneficial, because through a kind of Darwinian process, the people who leave their homelands are more likely to be ambitious, desperate in a useful way, disciplined, than people who stay in unfortunate situations. That is hard for the immigrants, it's good for the U.S.
Asians are the nation's fastest growing immigrant group. Close to 10 million are here, nearly half along the Pacific coast, and almost 1 million in New York City. They bring a new dimension to the nation's cultural mix. But like past immigrants, they've had to struggle for acceptance.
I think there are a lot of misconceptions about Asians. First of all, one that Asian Americans are not, it's not a monolithic group. There are a lot of different cultures, Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, Vietnamese, and I think that, there's always been this perception that we're all one and the same.
In the, I guess, early 1900s, they were considered as yellow perils, they were considered as immoral, they're considered as dirty, unassimilable. Whereas in the 1970s and in the 80s, in the late 80s, they are now considered as a model minority. And you have media and magazines full of Asian success stories. Now in the 90s, we have Japan bashing, we have constant antagonism against Asians, and especially towards Japanese.
Regardless of obstacles, a new generation of Asian Americans is successfully entering the political arena. Representative Gary Locke is one of the most respected legislators in the state of Washington. The son of a Chinese restaurant owner, he now chairs the powerful House Finance Committee in Olympia.
Asian Americans were here at the turn of the century. My grandfather was here at the turn of the century, and most Asian Americans worked in the railroads, building the railroads across the United States, and they worked the mines, they worked the fisheries up in Alaska, and they helped to log the timber. And while that was a very hard physical labor, the most recent immigrants are now doing some of the same thing, blue-collar type work, but many of them, because of the knocking down the barriers of discrimination, are immediately able to go into technical and professional work as engineers and doctors and lawyers and as scientists.
Historically, immigrants from Asia were brought in as cheap labor, and many new arrivals still work at low-paying jobs. The big demand today, however, is for scientists, engineers, and wealthy investors. Immigration quotas for these categories were raised last year. Young immigrants learn to adapt most easily, but they often bring lessons of their own.
Well, I think the basic difference is in the value system of the two cultures. In the Orient, most people consider the educated people as of a higher class or something. But in America, in order to be a higher class, you have to have more money.
What I found was that the first day I came to new school, that I don't know anything else, English, science, and nothing else but math, because what I learned in 6th grade was equivalent of what I'm learning probably in 8th grade or 9th grade here. I just found out that it's really slow here. In China, they really push you.
Schooling in some Asian nations is 80 days a year more than in the United States. They believe that to develop economic power, you must first maximize the production of brain power. But in the United States, public education is failing to prepare students for the demands of this high-tech era.
The coefficient of a quadratic term in each case has been 1. Now,
special honors high schools like Brooklyn Tech in New York are trying to bridge the gap, and the new Asian students are a big part of that effort.
I think nationally we'd be in tough shape in a number of areas if we didn't have this Asian immigration, particularly in areas, intellectual areas, and in some of the sciences. We'd be in trouble in graduate schools. They wouldn't be able to fill some of the graduate school programs in the sciences if these kids weren't doing it. So we're fortunate that they're here at a time when we need a certain renewal, restructuring in our own society, and they're going to be, I think, a good deal of the backbone of it.
Whether you're born here, or you come here, or you shipped here, whatever you want to call it, right? There's always, America offers a chance, which will always be open for me. I'll always be American. You know, people may see me Asian, oh, she's Chinese, like, oh, look at the chink, look at the chink, you know, but I'll always be American, whether they see it or not.
For immigrants, this remains the land of hope and haven. But for many Americans, it has become a society that has not lived up to its promise. More and more citizens live hungry and homeless in our major cities. Violence, crime, and drugs spread while hospitals, schools, and libraries are cut back across the country. The nation's weakened economy intensifies many of its social problems, hurting Americans at home and crippling the country's ability to compete in the international marketplace.
In the long run, a nation's ability to sort of make its way in the world depends on its ability to earn its way in the world. American politics seems not to have found a way to deal with this fundamental fact. Every so often, somebody burbles up and says, oh, the foreigners are taking advantage of us. Oh, we have to be tough on the foreigners, especially the Asians. But almost nobody has developed some serious way of saying, in the long run, we have to do things differently if we're to defend our national interests.
I have a feeling that something is slipping away from us. Now, maybe it takes an apocalyptic event. If it does, I'm sorry to hear it, because a lot of people are going to get hurt. But we are in a crisis now. It may be an amorphous crisis, but a crisis it is. And for the first time in my grown-up life, and I am 57 years old, I never was worried in World War II. I wasn't worried in Korea, and I wasn't worried in Vietnam, and I wasn't worried in Watergate. For the first time in my life, I'm worried about the future of this country.
The Pacific is not just a part of our history, it's a part of our future. It's the greatest challenge we have before us. And America's pluralistic society, interestingly enough, is the only nation in the Pacific capable of playing a leading role in bringing all these different races, peoples, ideas, and theories together.
From the earliest days of this republic, the destinies of America and Asia were joined. Yankee traders sailed west to make their fortunes. As the nation grew, we came to see the Pacific as our rightful domain. Later, as Japan and other Asian nations began to modernize, conflicts developed. The United States fought 3 wars in the Pacific over the past half-century. And for a time, we saw the region in terms of old-fashioned military power and Cold War bases. Now, as we approach the 21st century, we begin to see national achievement differently. More than any other factors, the meteoric rise of Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and maritime China, among others, have shown us that a nation's strength lies more in its manufactures than in its missiles. There is a new dynamic coursing through the Pacific nations. It is fueled by investment in education, a commitment to government, and the belief that economics is more than the pursuit of private gain. It is the means to build a better nation. Today we must reinvent our mission. Competition is not the same as war. By strengthening our economy while reaching out to the region around us, we can turn the divisions of the past into a shared future. The Pacific Century.
Major funding for this program was provided by the Annenberg CPB Project and the Ford Foundation. To order video cassettes